Tonight we're going to continue talking about the judges, and we didn't really finish the story of Jephtha last time. So we're going to finish the story of Jephtha, talk about the civil war that happened, a brief civil war under Jephtha, and then talk about Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, which we don't have very much about. So just to remember what we talked about last time, Jephtha was a son of Gilead by a prostitute, and so his brothers chased him away from home, saying that he would not inherit with them. But the Ammonites attacked Gilead again, and we find that the people at that point had really repented, and they had turned back to God. And I believe that probably has something to do with their treatment now of Jephtha also, but I'm not positive. But anyway, at this time they called Jephtha to come back and lead them, and he has a good attitude. He does not hold a grudge against them. He comes back and he helps them, and he leads the Gileadites against the Ammonites, and God gave them the victory. But we also remember that Jephtha had made a vow that if God would give him the victory, then when he returned home, the first thing that came out to welcome him, when he got home, he would sacrifice to the Lord, and that happened to be his daughter. And so he was very faithful. His daughter also was very faithful, and he did fulfill his vow. All right, so when we get to chapter 12 of Judges, we have the rest of the story of Jephtha. And it says, "Then the men of Ephraim gathered together, crossed over toward Zaphon, and said to Jephtha, 'Why did you cross over to fight against the people of Ammon, and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you with fire.'" All right, so we'll pause there. So the Ammonites are on the other side of the Jordan River, as is Gilead, where Jephtha is. And so Ephraim crosses over the Jordan River. So the tribe of Ephraim, they're upset, and they say, "You should have called us to come and fight." And the only reason I can see that they would be upset about not being involved in the fight, at least to this ungodly level of threatening to burn his house down on him, is that they're losing out on part of the spoils of war. So if they had gone to fight, they would have shared in the spoils of the people of Ammon, who were defeated. And so they're angry that they didn't get part of that. And so they're even threatening to burn down Jephthah's house on him. Okay, verse 2, "And Jephtha said to them, 'My people and I were in a great struggle with the people of Ammon, and when I called you, you did not deliver me out of their hands. So when I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the people of Ammon, and the Lord delivered them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me?'" All right, so Jephtha says that he did, in fact, call the Ephraimites at some point, and that they had not come when he called them. We don't read about that in the previous chapter, but I don't see any reason for him to lie about that here. Their attitude is ungodly anyway. They're already in the wrong. So he's basically saying, you don't have a right to be angry here, especially because I did call you to come and you didn't. So the Ephraimites are just completely wrong in this situation. But you notice that again, there's this emphasis. Jephtha is emphasizing it's the Lord that gave them the victory. He's not taking the credit for himself, even though he says, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the people of Ammon. But he doesn't say, and I had victory. He says, the Lord delivered them into my hand. And so we see that he makes sure to give God the rightful credit for the victory. All right, then in verse 4, it says, Now Jephtha gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim, because they said, You Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manassites. All right, so the people of Gilead basically lived among Manasseh. Their territory was kind of on the border with Manasseh and Gad, but basically they're among the people of Manasseh that are on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And the people of Ephraim are saying, you're fugitives here. You are people that are to be punished. You just haven't been caught yet. And it says that Gilead defeated Ephraim in this fight because Ephraim was saying this. God was not going to be with Ephraim when they had this ungodly attitude. And so he gave Gilead and Jephtha the victory again. This time against other Israelites, but Israelites who are behaving in a very ungodly way. All right, verse 5, the Gileadites seized the fords of the Jordan before the Ephraimites arrived. And when any Ephraimite who escaped said, Let me cross over, the men of Gilead would say to him, Are you an Ephraimite? If he said no, then they would say to him, Then say Shibboleth. And he would say Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they would take him and kill him at the fords of the Jordan. There fell at that time 42,000 Ephraimites. And Jephtha judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephtha the Gileadite died and was buried among the cities of Gilead. So we find here that the Ephraimites had come over, and then now they're defeated. They want to escape back across the Jordan, and they're not going to let them do that. They came over here, for a bad reason. We're not going to let them get away. And the way that they could tell that they were really an Ephraimite is because the Ephraimites could not pronounce the sh sound. I suppose they had a lisp or something like it. I'm not sure what that speech impediment would be called. Or maybe it's just because they just don't use that sound when they're normally speaking, as people pronounce things differently in different areas, even if they speak the same language. But that would give them away. And so 42,000 of the Ephraimites died. And these were all ones who had crossed over with a bad aim to attack the Gileadites, because the Gileadites had a victory from God over the Ammonites, and the Ephraimites were angry that they were not involved in that victory. And so we find Jephtha only judged Israel 6 years before he died. I don't know how old he was. I get the idea that he wasn't that old, but he dies after judging Israel 6 years. All right, so we see here on the map that Manasseh, at least half of the tribe of Manasseh, is on the east side of the Jordan, and so is Gilead right there in the middle of Manasseh. And Ephraim is on the west side of the Jordan. So the Ephraimites cross over into the area of Gilead and want to attack them, but then they're defeated. And when they try to cross back over, they can't, because the Gileadites seize the fords, the low places where people could cross the river. And if anybody came through, they would test them to see if they were an Ephraimite, and if they were, they would kill them there. So Basically the civil war that happened during that part of Judges. We'll find another one later on in the book of Judges as well, unfortunately. All right, and then we find some other judges after Jephtha in chapter 12 in verses 8 through 10. It says, "After him, Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons, and he gave away 30 daughters in marriage, and brought in 30 daughters from elsewhere for his sons. He judged Israel 7 years. Then Ibzan died and was buried at Bethlehem." So very little is said about him, other than he's from Bethlehem, and he has 30 sons and apparently 30 daughters as well. So 60 children. I don't know how many wives, but he must have had a number of wives here. But we find this with several of the judges, that they actually had a lot of children. And I wonder if that was something that actually helped them to be prepared for judging Israel as a nation, being the father over so many children. So Bethlehem, we know, is down in the area right around Jerusalem, south of Jerusalem. And so that's where this judge lived. All right, and then in verses 11 and 12, it says, "After him, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel. He judged Israel 10 years. And Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried at Aijalon in the country of Zebulun." All right. Somebody needs to mute their microphone, please. All right. So Elon the Zebulunite. So he's from the northern part of Israel, around Galilee. And that's where Zebulun is. And he judges Israel for 10 years. And that's pretty much what we know. So Zebulun is up there near the Sea of Galilee on the western side of Galilee. And so that's where he was. And it seems like a number of the judges come from that area, as well as several from Gilead. All right, and then in verses 13 through 15, it says, "After him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, judged Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode on 70 young donkeys. He judged Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried in Pirathon in the land of Ephraim, in the mountains of the Amalekites." All right, so here, this man is from Pirathon, which I wouldn't know where that city is, but it tells us it's in the land of Ephraim, and I was able to find it on a map, assuming the map is accurate. And he has 40 sons and 30 grandsons. It's interesting that he has fewer grandsons than he has sons. Perhaps he had young sons before he died, and so they hadn't had time to have their own sons at this point, but the older ones had sons, and so they had 40 sons and 30 grandsons riding on 70 young donkeys. Now, this sounds a lot like one that we read about before, but in that case, they also had cities, 30 cities that they had in the land of Gilead. It doesn't say that about him and his sons and grandsons, but they were apparently some important people riding on these donkeys throughout Israel. And so he was able to judge Israel for 8 years. Again, not very long. And so you can see there Ephraim on the western side of the Jordan River, and Pirathon on the map that I have is right at the top of Ephraim. All right. So what do we learn from these stories, these short stories of Jephtha, as well as these other judges? Well, In the story of Jephtha and the Civil War, the Ephraimites we see are very unjust in attacking Jephtha. They're claiming they were not invited to the fight. Well, that's not a reason to kill someone. They should be rejoicing that their brothers have received a victory from the Lord. But they have greed. They want to be part of the ones taking the spoil. But Jephtha even says that he called them and they did not come to help, which makes what they're doing even worse. And so they made the mistake of crossing into the territory of Gilead. And so when they were defeated, they could not return home. The Gileadites cut off their path. And they had accused the people of Gilead of being fugitives, but they actually became the fugitives. And they could not say the word shibboleth, and so were killed as a result. Their greed as a tribe came back on their heads, and they lost a lot of soldiers because of that. Then we see after Jephtha, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon judging Israel. None of them judged for a long time. Even Jephtha did not judge for a long time. But they had some influence over the nation, and God was using them. And then we find with Ibzan and Abdon that both of them had many children. That's as opposed to Jephtha, who had only the one daughter before he had to sacrifice her. And so we see God could use both. He could use those with many children. He could use those with perhaps no children or just one child. And I'm wondering if those that had many children, if that was helpful in preparing them to lead the nation. We know with elders in the Lord's church having children, that they've proven that they can raise properly and guide in the way of the Lord is a necessary requirement. And for leading God's nation, it perhaps was something that was helpful for those particular men. But of course, God was able to use those who even were not married, who had no children at all. And we'll see that especially next time with Samson, although he will get married at one point, but he pretty much lives his life unmarried. And yet God is still able to use him as a judge. So they didn't have these requirements like we have for elders today, but some of these experiences in life, I wonder why it talks about how many children they have. Perhaps that was a useful thing in preparing them. And perhaps, with Jephtha, even though he didn't have many children, he had experience as a warlord to lead people in battle. And we don't know about everybody's experiences, but we see that God can use different ways of preparing people for the deliverance that he wants to use them to bring about. And so we see a lot of providence in the book of Judges as God provides for his people, and they have what they need. They have the preparation they need. They have the deliverance that they need, and God is the one who gets the credit in the end. All right, that's the lesson for tonight. Thank you.